Hi, this is a screencast. We're trying to teach you how to do R inside of Emacs. So that's easy. Let's just fire up R. What we do is we press Alt X and then type a capital R and hit enter. Then Emacs asks us for our starting project directory. The default is a home directory. Let's take that. All right, so here we have R working inside of Emacs. How cool. So we can do everything that we could usually do in different versions of R. And there's a couple of nice convenience features. So here, typing at the command line, you know, we can, you know, usually we use the left arrow for the assignment in R. And so one way to do that is to actually type it out like in, you know, like usual. In Emacs, you can also use underscore, and that's gonna just assign the. It's just gonna insert that instead. So usually that's what I do. So it's a little quicker to type the shift underscore than it is to type the space less than dash for doing the assignment. Here we're gonna make a vector of 100 random normal variates. We can make a histogram. It's gonna pop up a window so we can see our histogram in a separate window. And yeah, so that's kind of like the basic R in Emacs. So one thing that you might want to do is you might want to get help on these functions that we're using. And so by default, we see that when you type help or the question mark at the Emacs command line, it's by default popping up the help in a web browser. If you like that, that's that's okay, and you can leave that. I usually like to have my help inside of Emacs actually, so let's try that. How do we get help inside of Emacs? Well, I have a command that I was using to do that. So let's take a look. Inside of my Rprofile, I have this options help type equals text. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to put it into my new Rprofile that I have that I'm creating just for this series of screencasts. So the Rprofile, you see in Emacs, it's recognized as an R script file. You see down here in the mode line, it says ESSR, and that means that we're using the Emacs Speak Statistics R mode for this file. It automatically recognizes that the .rprofile is an R buffer, and so it's using syntax highlighting to show us a more informative representation of that R code. So here, now what I can do inside of my Rprofile file, I'm going to first save it by doing Control X, Control S, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an Emacs Speak Statistics command, Control C, then Control N, and what that does is that sends a line of code from an R script file to the interactive R process that it's associated with. So here there's only one active R process, so it just sends it down here. And it also opens up the second window down here so you can see um, your script and your command line at the same time. You see the mode of this command line is the iESS mode. That means the interactive Emacs Speak Statistics mode for R. So two different modes, two different buffers. Now what we just did is we sent that options line, we executed it in our R buffer. So now if we do our help command again, we're going to see a different kind of help display. So First of all, how do we do command line completion in ESS? Well, if you just type the up arrow, that's not going to work because that just navigates up one line with your cursor. Instead, what you can do is you can do Alt up arrow. Alt up arrow actually doesn't work. But if you've learned your Emacs key combinations from the tutorial, you'll know that pressing Control P navigates up one line, Control N navigates down one line, so that's P for previous, N for next. And there's corresponding Alt commands which do the command completion. So Alt P gives you the previous history item. So going back to 3 items, Alt N gives you the next history item. Another way to search your history is you can do Alt R for regex history iSearch backwards, and that's going to search all of your history for all of the previous command lines you've typed in this session. So for example, if I type H, it's gonna show me, hey, this is a history item that has the hist command in it. Here, then I'm gonna type enter, and that's gonna give me that command on my current command line. And then I'm gonna type enter again, and that's going to pop up the help page. So now not as in a web browser, but now in a new Emacs window with yet another different mode. This is the ESS Help mode. And so this is a pretty cool mode because it allows you to very easily navigate through your help files. Like for example, if you want to go to the examples section, which I usually find to be the most useful, you can go type just letter S followed by letter E, which means section examples. Letter S for section, letter E for examples. Navigates right down to the examples section. And then you can actually just go down here and execute these lines of code just like it was in our script. So here I'm using Control N to get down to that line of code. Here I'm using Control C, Control N to send that line of code to my interactive R buffer. Control C, Control N to send that next line of code. Let's see what's going on over there in our plotting window. There it is. Control C, Control N again to get a second histogram. Control C, Control N again to get a third histogram. And finally, you can keep doing these Control C, Control N's until you get done with the whole block. But hey, what if you wanted to do a whole block in one go? So there's another ESS command to do a whole block of code all at once. And that's Control C, Control C. And so we can see that that didn't have any effects on the plotting, but it did have an effect in our command line. You see that the require utils and these two stir hist lines were actually sent. So now going back here, if we do Control C again, we can see that, well, that's only going to send one line of code because here that one line of code is delimited by white space. And so what that Control C is doing actually, it's sending all of the code except in a block, and the blocks are delimited by lines with just white space. So that could be useful for organizing your code for sending whole blocks. So what else can we do? I'm going to cancel that command, Control G. And here it's in the middle of some commands, so this might happen. You have some long-running R command or something that was never completed. You can press Control. Oh, it did. It did work. What I was going to say though is here, if it's hanging, you can press Control G to get out of that hang. and then Control C in your R buffer should cancel the last command as soon as it can interrupt it, and then it'll give you a new R command line. So that's also R dependent. R doesn't check for interrupt sequences all the time. So here it interrupts as soon as it can. So another thing you might want to do is you might want to send a whole region. So here we have 3 different blocks, or we have two different separate blocks that have one that defines some random chi-square variables, and here we have some plot. And so if we wanted to send both of those at the same time, what we can do is control space to set a mark, and you see down at the bottom here that in the mini buffer we see the mark is set. And then after that we can start navigating around, like for example with control N to go down lines, and you can see now we're selecting a bunch of lines that we may want to execute. So say we want to execute all of these lines of code, you can do control C, control R. That's going to execute everything that was selected. It's control C, control R. So you see the command was eval region. The R is for region. Control C, you notice we're prefixing all of these send commands with control C. Control C means we want to send something to our R process from our R script. Then after that, the control after that tells us what do we want to send. Control C, control N, that means send one line. Control, that's one line only. Control C, that's sending the whole block. And then control C, control R, like we saw, that's sending a region. Another thing that we can do, instead of navigating down with a control N and control P for navigating up, well, here we can set a mark with our control space, and then we can use control S to initiate an iSearch. Then we can type, say we want to do all of the code until that second comment. Well, then we can type a couple of first and signs to, sorry, not and signs, a couple of pound signs to select all the text until those pound signs. Then we can type control S again to get to that second pound sign after the start of our search. Now we have that whole region selected, which we can send again using control C, control R. So as you can see with Emacs, there's a bunch of different ways you can use to navigate through your code, or the help examples, and interact with your R process. So again, we can use these section commands, right? So A, I think, sends you to the arguments, and here we can look through and see all of the different arguments for the hist function, just like we can. One of the cool things about Emacs is you can use all of the editing commands that you're familiar with in the context of these other buffers. So, say that we're back at the top. So here I'm going to go back to the top using Shift, Alt, comma. That goes back to the top. And here we have, say that we're looking for, here I'm going to go down one page with Control V. Say we're looking for the documentation for the density argument. What we could do is we could use an iSearch again to just look for that thing. Control S to initiate the iSearch, and then type density, and with a colon after it, that sends us right to the first place where the density is mentioned in that man page. So yeah, using these Emacs commands, you can very quickly navigate through your R scripts and your help files. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the iSearch with Control G. You notice, so when I stop the the iSearch with Control G, what it did is it takes me back to the place where I started my iSearch. So another thing that you can do if you want to stay in that place that you got to, you can do, let's do that iSearch again, density colon. And here if we want to keep that place, well, we can either do some navigating commands or we can just press enter, and that's going to leave us right there. So to get out of this help command, this help page, there's a special just single letter code. You can just type in xget to get out, and it sends you right back to the command line. Here I'm going to do Alt P to get back that hist command, and then enter to send that and get back to my man page. Just because I want to show you a little bit about where is all this stuff documented? How am I supposed to remember? The S is for going to the sections, X is for exiting out of the man page. This is a lot of stuff to remember, right? Well, there's man pages for all of this stuff that you can consult using the standard Emacs documentation. So here you can type Control H, which is the prefix for all of the help commands. And so here it says type question mark for further options. So let's just do that. So type one of the options listed or space or del to scroll. So here it gives all of the different options that Emacs provides for accessing help. So A is apropos pattern searching. C is for key sequences. F is for functions, but here I'm going to scroll down by pressing space, just like it says down here in the mode line, or in the mini buffer, sorry. And here we see M, display documentation of current minor modes and current major mode, including their special commands. And that's what we want to see now. So let's type M. So now we see it's opened up this buffer down here, which is explaining about the ESS help mode. In the mini buffer, it says type Q in help window to restore its previous buffer, or Control Meta V to scroll help. Let's try that. Control Meta V. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So we didn't have to even change to the help buffer, but we scrolled it. We can do that with the mouse too if you want. I'm just using my mouse wheel here. Anyway, so it explains that the ESS help, it's a mode defined here if you want to see the source code, there it is. So it explains all of the, here this is some text that's written to kind of summarize the whole mode, and then P to move to the next and previous section, S to jump to a particular section, something for help, Q to return to the ESS section, X to kill the buffer first. So the X we typed earlier, that's killing the help buffer and going back to your ESS section. If we just typed Q, that's going to keep the buffer open, but return to the ESS section. The usual commands for evaluating ESS source are available, right? So that's the Control C, Control N, Control C, Control R, Control C, Control C commands that we were talking about earlier. So here it's scrolling down, we can see the keys and the bindings, right? So in this mode, in the help window here, what we see is that all of these things are, have non-standard bindings. So you can see here that the letter Q is bound to the quit window command. The letter R is bound to the ESS eval region and go command, etc. Right? So you can see, what key sequences are used in all of this stuff. So in particular here, going down, we see Control C, ES eval region or function or paragraph and step. So so this is what we were doing earlier in the help buffer, right? So if you if you want to know all of the different key sequences that you could possibly press and what they do, that's the main documentation, right? So You can also click here and it sends you to that Emacs man page where it shows you what that thing does, right? So ESS, eval region or function or paragraph and step. It sends the region, function, or paragraph depending on the context, right? So that's what we were using down um, in the R help buffer to send the code chunks to the R command line. And so yeah, so here inside of the R buffer, R help buffer again, um, another way to get to the same place, here I'm going to press Q to get out of that Emacs help buffer. But another way to get some help about like what are those command sequences doing, right? We just did that using again the Control H key and we typed question mark for further options. And remember, we went back down to this, and we typed the M to display documentation of the current minor mode and current major modes, right? But another way to get the same information would be the K keys, right? Display the full documentation for the key sequence. So if we type a little K here, in the mini buffer now it says describe the following key, mouse click, or menu item. So now if we type, for example, the Control C, here it opens up an Emacs help window that says Control C runs the command ESS eval region or function or paragraph in step, right? That's exactly what we were just looking at, right? Send the region, function, or paragraph depending on the context. So anyway, all of this to say that there's a variety of ways that you can learn about these different key sequences, and it's all very well documented. So that's one of the real major advantages of R and open source software in general. Lots of good documentation. Emacs and ESS, the same deal. So here I'm going to press X to quit out of that. And now we're back at our command line. So that was, I think, pretty good for one basic screencast. Thanks for listening and see you next time.